easier to talk about 6- and 8-year-old videos than it is to talk about how smoothly the opening of the second open enrollment period has gone so far.
But you would acknowledge he was an important figure in the crafting of this law.
Well, I think the President acknowledged in the news conference that he did over the weekend that Mr. Gruber was an advisor.
Are you downplaying his significance in crafting the Affordable Care Act?
He's somebody who has offered advice to Democrats and Republicans as they've implemented health care policy.
I remember that when I was in the White House, he was certainly viewed as an important figure in helping to put ObamaCare together. The problem is not that Gruber helped them put ObamaCare together, because he was the man. The problem is what he said in the last 2 weeks and how the White House has handled it.
Steve Ratner there, who was in the White House and called Gruber the man. We're back with the panel. George, your thoughts on this?
Well, they don't need Gruber to help the Supreme Court case that may, in my judgment, will gut the Obamacare law, because although what Gruber said is inconvenient, there's other legislative history. What was said in the Finance Committee, the authorizing committee, was that, as Gruber said, the point was to restrict the subsidies to states that would establish their own exchanges in order to squeeze, that was Gruber's phrase, to squeeze the states into compliance. So they don't need Gruber because they've got the same thing echoed in the actual legislative history, which it is quite reasonable for a court to consult.
Well, I guess the thing that hits people in the face is when you hear the White House, you hear the President calling him some advisor, you hear the White House saying no big deal. That was 6 to 8 years ago. It felt a little bit like, dude, that was 2 years ago. But it seems like there's this disconnect between the reality of who he was and what he did on Obamacare and what they're saying now.
Well, you know, I've put Jonathan Gruber on the air many times because he was not only, he developed the computer model, the algorithm that was going to explain how you can finance this through subsidies. He did it for ObamaCare in Massachusetts, and then he did it for Obamacare. I mean, I think that trying to downplay his importance doesn't take away the incredible embarrassment that this guy is causing them because of the comments about transparency and we couldn't tell people it was a tax because the American people don't understand how health insurance works. Some people get something out of it, and some people pay into it. I think that George is right, though. The comments that he made about the state exchanges are much more dangerous because he's a guy who's supposed to understand how the law was intended to work.
And in the short term, that's the biggest threat to Obama.
That is the biggest threat. On the other hand, there are the real architects of the law, the people who literally wrote it, like Ron Wyden and Carl Levin, and they said, look, if you're looking for Congress's intent, there is lots of stuff in that law that makes it extremely clear that we wanted everyone to be able to get a subsidy, whether the exchange was set up by the state or set up by the federal government.
I mean, you're on this specific issue.
I mean, you can't say that Congress didn't, that the people who passed this law did not intend everyone to have a subsidy.
They did, and they intended to pressure the states into doing this, and the states exercised their sovereign right under federalism to say no. Too bad. They lost.
Yeah, I mean, I'm troubled by the administration's attempt to distance itself from one of the architects of Obamacare, but I guess I've come to expect that from this president and from his administration. I mean, this is what they do. They're not afraid to I think, be dishonest if it furthers their interests. I'm equally troubled by the reporters who are refusing to cover this, or in some cases, actually pretending that he's not who they said he was just months ago. There was a Politico article in which the reporter wrote a lead, and she said, you know, Jonathan Gruber, chief architect of Obamacare, et cetera, et cetera. The same reporter just wrote an article recently saying, was Jonathan Gruber really an architect of Obamacare? This is hackery. This is just dishonest journalism. And I think journalists have a lot to answer for in terms of being deceived or being enablers of the administration in the first place to pass Obamacare. But they have even more to answer for right now.
Well, and some are choosing to say this is the conservative story. It just fits the conservative meme, as opposed to he was a guy who was paid by HHS that they cited not saying that he was paid by HHS again and again and again, And yet the administration is now distancing themselves.
Yeah, look, I mean, this has all of the elements of a good journalistic story. It has conflict of interest. It has outright deception. I mean, it is the kind of inside Washington story that journalists who work in this town should love. And the people who are today pretending that this isn't a story, they're not journalists. They're enablers. They're working for the administration.
I did this last night, but does this change the debate over this?
It changes the debate because it takes members of the Republican Party who were reluctant to go hard on Obamacare in the new Congress and ensures that they'll do that.
Well, I don't know what Republicans were reluctant to go hard on Obamacare, because I think, but it does give them more ammunition.
It gives the Republicans the opportunity not to go hard against Obamacare, to place all their wager on the Supreme Court by the end of June, striking this down. If there are no subsidies in 36 states, there can be no individual mandate. You cannot mandate that people buy something they can't afford to buy.
That is one